In July of 2024, the British medium Tortoise Media launched its investigative podcast titled Master: The Accusations against Neil Gaiman, where they exposed several cases of abuse in which the writer was allegedly involved. These accusations were a real media shock. Not only because Gaiman is a talented and successful writer whose works like The Sandman, American Gods, Good Omens, and Coraline are considered gems of pop culture and have been adapted to various media, but also because he has always been shown as a defender of progressive causes. In his stories, Gaiman addressed lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender themes before it was popular, gave weight and development to trans protagonists, and even in an issue of The Sandman, condemns the actions of a writer who calls himself a feminist while keeping the muse Calliope in captivity for his own benefit. So hearing about such an accusation was shocking, particularly for those of us who have been fans of his work. The information from Tortoise was recently expanded by Vulture magazine, which gave more details and interviewed more alleged victims, so Neil Gaiman also responded to the accusations from his personal blog. But what is really being said about him and how true is it? We're going to talk about that in this video as we've gathered all the information on the Neil Gaiman case, both from the articles and his own statements, and we present it to you here in an orderly and clear manner so that you're well informed. To do this effectively, I'll present the information neutrally, share my personal opinion, and then discuss whether separating the author from the work is possible or advisable. My name is Go, the Geek Monitor, and today we're going to take Neil Gaiman very seriously. The famous writer Richard Maddock is under pressure to write his new novel. However, he hasn't written anything in over a year due to a lack of ideas. But someone appears to have a solution. Maddock goes to see the old and famous writer Erasmus Fry, who gives him a muse named Calliope. "But Erasmus, you promised to free me before you die." "Writers are liars, dear." You must have realized that by now. Over the following years, Calliope poured hundreds of wonderful ideas into Maddock's mind, who gained much fame, fortune, and considered himself a feminist writer while keeping Calliope captive. Until one day Morpheus visited him. The Prince of Dreams and Stories asks Maddock to free Calliope because if he needed ideas, he could provide them in abundance. At that moment, myriad ideas flooded Maddock's mind. So many that they were impossible to land or understand, so Maddock began to write frantically on the walls until he wore out the tips of his own fingers. Ultimately, Maddock frees Calliope and is left devoid of any ideas. This story demonstrates how Neil Gaiman earned his reputation. He not only masterfully combines horror with dreams and ideas with pain, but he also seems to pass moral judgment, condemning those people like Maddock, wolves in sheep's clothing, who use others for their own benefit. But after the accusations, we could reinterpret the message. Perhaps not only Morpheus contains part of Gaiman's personality, but he also embodied part of himself in his character Maddock, the last writer to use Calliope, the muse who was originally trapped by another writer with the following words: "You can call me master." But let's go to the beginning of this controversy. What is being said about Neil Gaiman? That's what is known about the alleged victims. In 2003, Neil Gaiman meets an 18-year-old girl originally named Kay and later Kendra Stout at a book signing event. 2 years later, he starts a relationship with her. According to Kendra, things started consensually but later turned non-consensual. And she says that Gaiman subjected her to rough and painful relations that she neither wanted nor enjoyed. According to Kendra, Gaiman did not use lubricants, and when she complained, he told her it was because she was not submissive enough. He also insisted that she call him master, which can be translated as master or teacher. And he practiced sadomasochism, but never a talk about limits or safe words. One incident happened while she had a urinary tract infection, which worsened the pain. Last October, Kendra filed a police report accusing Gaiman of rape. Neil, for his part, acknowledges that he had a relationship with Kendra and acknowledges the sadomasochistic practices, but in a statement his representative said sexual degradation, domination, sadism and masculism may not be to everyone's taste, but between two consenting adults, it is a legal practice. Another of the victims presented was Scarlett Pavlovich, originally just called Scarlett, who began having a friendship with Gaiman's ex-wife, Amanda Palmer, who is also a singer, songwriter and writer. According to Scarlett, she greatly admired Palmer, so living with her was kind of a dream. Gradually, Scarlett began to help Palmer with some errands and organizing events until Palmer proposed that she become the nanny for her son at Neil Gaiman's residence. It's important to note that Amanda and Neil's relationship was unstable during this period, as they had separated, reconciled, and then separated again over those months. On the first day of work, after leaving the child at a playdate, Scarlett and Gaiman are left alone in his house, chatting amiably while waiting for the child to return, when Gaiman suggested to Scarlett why not take a bath while she waited. Scarlett didn't know Gaiman's books, but she knew she was with someone important and wanted to make a good impression, so she agreed. However, what she didn't imagine was that shortly after, the writer would join her in that bath. Pavlovich says she tried to cover herself and objected repeatedly. From "I'm gay" to "I'm not comfortable with my body." But the writer continued calmly, as if nothing. Scarlett claims that Gaiman forced her into intimacy in a rough and humiliating way while telling her the phrase, "You can call me master." Pavlovich said it all happened too fast for him to know how to respond. She was alone, needed money, and so she continued with the nanny job. In the following days, Scarlett claims that Gaiman repeated these behaviors several times, even in circumstances where their son was present in the house, as if he had no fear of being seen. Weeks later, Scarlett spoke with Palmer about what had happened, and she told her, 14 women have approached me about this. This is very important because according to what Scarlett says, Gaiman's ex-wife, Amanda Palmer, was aware of these behaviors. According to Scarlett, after the bathtub incident, Gaiman told her, "Amanda said I couldn't have you." She also mentions that as a result of this accident, Amanda confronted Gaiman, and he accepted psychiatric help and sent her a text message that said the following: "Amanda tells me you're having a hard time about me and what I did. I feel terrible about this. Would you like us to talk about it? Is there anything I can do to make you feel better?" In the following weeks, Palmer assures Scarlett of his support and presence for her. But as the weeks go by, Scarlett doesn't feel that Amanda is really doing anything. Neil Gaiman sends her a confidentiality agreement and $9,200. She accepts, signs, and moves away from the couple. After sharing the experience, she decides to act. In January 2023, Pavlovich formally accuses Gaiman, but the police tell him that Amanda Palmer's statement would be essential in this case. Scarlett is sure that Palmer will support her. She is a public feminist and already knows what happened. However, Palmer declined to speak with the police when they contacted her. In fact, so far all she has said is the following: "Because I am in a process of divorce and custody, I cannot give a public comment. Please understand that, above all, I am a mother. I ask for privacy at this time." These cases are the most documented and those that have a police report. However, neither case has produced results so far. Another case involves Caroline, a 54-year-old woman who resided with her 3 daughters and husband on Gaiman's property, which he provided in return for services like masonry, attend to guests, etc. When Caroline divorced, Gaiman began to visit her, make insinuations, and they started the relationship, also consensual, at least initially. Caroline mentions that Gaiman and she had intimate encounters for 2 years, but that eventually she felt used and uncomfortable. Not only because of the rough encounters, but because sometimes Gaiman tried to have these encounters while their son was asleep in the same bed. Gaiman told her to leave the property and offered her $5,000 to sign a confidentiality agreement, escalating the tension. She asked for $300,000 and he agreed. According to Scarlett, Palmer was also aware of the situation. What are Neil Gaiman's thoughts on this topic? Off the bat, he does acknowledge that he had a relationship with both Kendra and Scarlett. And he also confirms that they were indeed rough in nature and there were indeed sadomasochistic relationships. So yes, Neil Gaiman accepts all of this. He claims all actions were consensual. He expresses horror and dismay on his blog regarding recent stories circulating about him online. As I read this compilation of events, some moments are vaguely familiar, while others are not. Descriptions of things that did happen sitting next to things that definitely did not happen. I am far from a perfect person, but I have never had non-consensual sexual activity with no one, ever. I went back to read the messages I exchanged with the women during and after the occasions that have been reported. As abusive, these messages are now read as I received them at the time. Of 2 people enjoying completely consensual sexual relations and wanting to see each other again, Gaiman also mentions that he does consider himself to have been emotionally inaccessible. At the same time, in his words, he was very sexually accessible. So he ignored the feelings of other people. However, he denies any form of abuse occurred. And if you notice, when we look at all this information, We start to see that there are some patterns that repeat. To start, everyone talks about Gaiman as a charming person. When you meet her, you will find that she's not only famous but also intelligent, kind and articulate, qualities that he used to relate to women much younger than him, which we may not see well, but it's not illegal. However, the point where things get murkier is when things move from romance to rough, intimate relationships, something he also confirmed. Relationships that, according to his statements, are consensual, but his ex-partners claim otherwise. Also, with the recent scandals have resurfaced moments from Gaiman's past as a member of the Church of Scientology, but the writer has always been very reserved on the subject, and we have no statements from other people who could confirm what kind of abuses, if any, he experienced during that time of his life and how they could have affected his subsequent relationships. In my view, when a beloved figure like Neil Gaiman is accused, many prefer to withhold judgment until a legal verdict is reached, which speaks to us of the principle of presumption of innocence, where a person is innocent until proven guilty. But we also have to be realistic and know that in these cases it gets complicated. These crimes occur privately, without witnesses to confirm or deny the facts. So, in many cases it's a matter of your word against mine. And in the Gaiman case, the situation becomes even more complicated, as many of the crimes were allegedly committed within a consensual relationship, with the only difference being the perception of the same fact. Gaiman admits to having rough, domineering relationships with these women, claiming everything was consensual, while they say it wasn't always the case. Let's remember that according to the law, consent must be given in each intimate relationship and can be withdrawn at any time. This frequently renders judicial sentences unenforceable. But this doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. It means it couldn't be verified if it happened. For example, in Mexico from 2015 to 2021, only 1.89% of files related to these crimes led to a conviction. So I feel it's important to analyze each case with an open and empathetic mind. They form personal opinions considering all angles, behavior patterns, and context of each case. What do you think about Neil Gaiman's case? I must confess that I'm a big fan of Neil's work. When a friend told me about the news and shared some details, I initially found it hard to believe, because I really admire Neil a lot. One of my big dreams is to interview him. Sandman is one of my all-time favorite comics. But after reading all the events, reviewing the level of detail of the events, and how Neil Gaiman himself confirms several of them through his blog and through other interviews, honestly, I feel it's true, but I can't confirm it. Many people also discuss the issue of false accusations, which undoubtedly exists and I have witnessed among acquaintances. But we also have to remember that false accusations are not as high as many people think. According to UN data, in countries where it has been measured, false accusations do not exceed 3% of reported cases. Do you think Neil is in that? That's what we're all wondering. Another big question is, should we stop consuming Gaiman's work? In other words, should we separate the author from the work? It is suggested that an artistic creation's value should be judged independently of the author's behavior, beliefs, or actions. It is common for horrible people to create beautiful works. A recent case involves the author Joanne Kathleen Rowling, who has made comments that are considered transphobic because some Harry Potter fans have chosen to stop consuming her products, particularly because this translates into income for her. But many other fans opt not to, because they believe that the world of Harry Potter can be enjoyed, even if you don't agree with JK's point of view. I personally am not of the idea that it has to be forcibly separated. I rather believe that it is a personal decision that should be taken depending on how much your perception of the work changes. After all these allegations, let's take Sandman as an example. Surely there will be many people who now consider that the Sandman is somewhat hypocritical, as it extols some values that its author definitely did not follow. For example, the story of Calliope now feels very different, as we can see Neil Gaiman reflected in the actions of Richard Maddock and not in those of Morpheus. If that's the case, it must be very difficult to enjoy Sandman. However, it's important to clarify that Morpheus is not truly heroic. He is an emotionally distant, capricious person who is capable of using his power and authority to ruin people's lives. A clear example of this is found in the story of Nada, whom Morpheus condemned to hell for not accepting his love. Many people do not perceive him as this irate and even evil figure. But this is because much of the Sandman series and comics take place after Morpheus was trapped for decades. This time in confinement allowed him to reflect and return to the world with a different outlook. I feel then that Neil Gaiman placed parts of his personality in more than one character, unconsciously reflecting different facets of his humanity throughout the stories of Morpheus, who does act in a chivalrous and gallant manner on certain occasions, but we also see him act motivated by resentment and emotion. Similarly, the story does condemn the actions of abusive male figures like Richard Maddock or Fawnland, a predator who takes advantage of vulnerable people, and all these contradictions coexist in the great story of interwoven dreams and nightmares that form the Sandman universe. Personally, I don't know how I'm going to see Sandman a year from now. Perhaps I can continue enjoying it, and when reading it, I still find elements that speak to me of these two facets of Gaiman, I mean the dream and the nightmare, or perhaps the next time I read it, all these scandals will end up eclipsing my taste for the comic. Separating the author from the work is a dilemma that does not have a universal answer. However, we must learn to listen to the voices that denounce with empathy, recognize the qualities of the work itself to see if they try to convince us of a message of which we were not aware, and realize that those people we admire are complex humans and sometimes contradictory. In the end, the decision to continue or not his work is as personal a decision as the stories that Gaiman told us, but it is undoubtedly a situation that as a fan leaves you a mark that will not be easily erased. If you enjoyed this video, check out these other video essays you might like. Remember, I upload 3-4 new free videos weekly on my Instagram that aren't shared here. That's all for today. I am Go, and keep looking beyond the obvious. Thank you.